I think this is episode 223 of the Source Material Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, this is kind of like last-minute substitution. Mark wanted to do Fear Itself for this week, but he had a social thing to go with his wife. So he wanted to cover that so bad, he moved that to October. He said, Jesse, you just find something to fill in there. I said, Bloodties. Me and Chris did a discussion regarding Fatal Attractions, and we ran down through all of the Marvel crossovers that occurred in the 90s. And one of the things that came up was Bloodties came after Fatal Attractions. And we found out, I found out reading this is like immediately after Fatal Attractions. That's what we're doing tonight. Marvel, we're heading back into Marvel 1990s here with Bloodties as our contribution to Marvel Event May. And joining me this evening, I got to do formal introductions here. I mentioned him already, Chris Armstrong. Chris Armstrong from the Unspoken Decade. Welcome back. You almost didn't make it, man. I'm glad you made it tonight.
At the buzzer.
That's right, dude. That's right. You were all excited too. I was like, man, because you posted that you sent me a message saying, I'm getting ready to read these. Here we go. And I'm like, damn, if he's not going to be able to make it to the show and not talk about what he's read, that's going to suck. So I'm glad you made it, dude. So, and for the first time in 3 years, coming back to the Source Material Podcast, he is a veteran podcaster. I want to say it, Jordan. A veteran podcaster now. He had from Ka-Pow, the pop cultured podcast, and the owner operator of my local comic book store here, Asylum Comics, right down there on 3rd Street in Marietta, Ohio. Jordan Lowe, are you ready to talk some 1990s Marvel mutants?
I am ready, Jesse. Thank you for having me back on.
Absolutely, dude. Absolutely. All right. Well, let's just kind of get Jordan, last time we had you on here, we were talking DC comics. We were talking Batman, The Dark Knight Returns. So that was a pretty epic book to be talking about. That was
that's one of my favorites. And then I re-listened to your Fatal Attractions episode today to catch up to get my memory straight on what was going on here in the X-Men universe. And I thought, why didn't he have me on that episode? There's so much good stuff in that book.
Dude, it was good.
There's so many great X-Men moments there. And then I'm reading. So we're reading Bloodties, I guess.
Obviously, comic books have been a part of your life for a very long time. I mean, you wouldn't just decide to go on a lark to own a comic book store because of all the fun I'm sure it entails, all the bills and all the worry. But, were you reading, were you a Marvel zombie, I guess you would say, in the 1990s, or where were you at here about this time?
Yeah, this is right pretty much at the beginning of my collecting days. I'd read them since I could read. We always had a random issue here or there in the house, or, a relative would pick you up one. So I always had comics, but I wasn't quote unquote a collector until these early 90s, and X-Men's what I started with. So yeah, this was definitely a nostalgia trip. This was some of my earliest collecting days.
Chris, how about you, man? Were you, I think we covered this on Fatal Attractions, but were you collecting this right after Fatal Attractions, still getting this, or what was going on?
Yeah, I was big into, all things X-Men at this time. Like, I didn't read every X title, but I was reading Uncanny and the standard X-Men book. I don't think I was really into Avengers that much. I would get it occasionally if like a cover popped out to me. And so I do remember having like a part 1 because I wanted to read like this story. I don't think I ever had the Avengers West Coast issue. I'm fairly certain I never finished. Like I never had part 5 with a silver foil cover. So I think reading this time through was the first time I ever actually read the full complete story. I do remember having the part 1 and part 2 when I was a kid,
Yeah, I know I was reading at this time. I have comics in my long boxes from this period of time, and I was an X-Men guy as well. I was pulling X-Men comics, and I was not picking up Avengers. For some reason, I don't know, maybe it was just because, you only have a certain amount of money when you're a kid.
Right.
And if you're going to, I knew well enough at that point in time that if I start spending money over here on one title, I'm going to be missing out probably what's going on over here in another one. So I had to stick with just one. So I didn't know what was going on in the Avengers at this point in time. Clearly we get a lot of
the leather jacket era of Avengers.
That's what I've heard it referred to as a couple of times here recently. We have Captain America's on the team. It looks like War Machine, Giant Man, or Hank Pym. I saw Wanda, Scarlet Witch. Vision appears to be part of them. Black Widow's there. Oh my goodness, help me out. Who am I forgetting here? I know I'm forgetting somebody on that team. Hawkeye's there.
But they're separate teams. It's the Avengers and the West Coast Avengers. I'm not sure. I think West Coast had Hawkeye,
Vision,
War Machine, probably the Vision.
Okay.
The standard Avengers team, Captain America, I think Scarlet Witch, Black Knight, and Quicksilver were probably all on the standard Avengers team. Again, I'm kind of guessing because it doesn't really tell you in these issues. I just remember Hawkeye was the leader of the West Coast Avengers, and War Machine was on that team. Spider-Woman.
Jordan, you mentioned Cersei. This is a character I knew nothing about. Any idea? Have you ever read anything with her in it?
I just know that she's one of the Eternals. Every era of Avengers or Justice League you read, you go back and there's always that one character. Like, when were they in Avengers? It's always just some random character you don't know anything about. But yeah, she was the definite left field call for me.
Wow, and she's a big player in this one too.
Yeah, she has some good moments.
Yeah. So to catch everybody up real quick, because like I said, Fatal Attractions led right into this. If you didn't listen to our previous episode, we have a basically the end-all be-all matchup between Professor Xavier and Magneto. They battle it out. Xavier wipes his brain and almost kind of leaves Magneto brain dead. Colossus leaves the X-Men to go up and hang out with Magneto on, I think this is Asteroid M or Avalon, one or the other.
Avalon, yeah.
Is Avalon? Okay. So goes up there, hangs out with Xavier, so the X-Men have lost one of their own. Not only that, Wolverine had the adamantium ripped from his bones and left in a really bad state. Kind of losing his way or trying to find himself, Wolverine decides to leave the team. So this is an X-Men that we're talking about that does not have one of those big-time members, which is Wolverine. The X-Men are, I should have this in front of me, Cyclops, Storm, Rogue, Gambit. I think that's your favorite character, isn't it there, Chris? Gambit?
I'm a fan. I don't.
Are you? Okay, I thought I saw you joking around saying I'm not a fan of Gambit. So, all right.
No, I was reading this, but I'm not sure after reading it why I ever was.
Oh man.
I mean, Gambit was cool because of the cartoon when you were a kid. You could tell, oh, he's supposed to be cool. He's got 5 o'clock shadow. He's got an accent. He uses a bow staff. He uses playing cards. So I think like a preteen, a teenager is going to kind of gravitate towards him, like even though it's forced a little bit. So I liked him when I was a kid. I'm kind of indifferent towards him now.
Well, I remember as a reading at this point in time, the big love angle that they were pushing between Gambit and Rogue. You know, Gambit is infatuated, and it was almost like that forbidden love because Rogue couldn't touch you, and that was probably one of the hardest things for a man who loves a woman not to be able to touch her skin. And it all seemed like, are these guys ever going to kiss? There's no way they can. Rogue will absorb his powers. He'll die. What's going to happen? And there's always that sexual tension. I'll put it out there. The sexual tension between the two. That's evidenced a couple times in this book. And I'll probably talk about that here as we get to our talking points. But I'm trying to pull up the X-Men here to see who we got.
At least in the first issue was Beast, Bishop, Cyclops, Gambit, Iceman, Jean Grey, Quicksilver, Rogue, and Storm. Archangel shows up at one point. Psylocke's in there for a couple panels. Like I said, throughout this, the people just kept popping up, and I couldn't remember if they had been there the whole time. The cast is so big, they were just like, "Quick, Archangel, get him!" I was like, "Wait, has he been
there?" Where's he coming from? Revanche or Revanche? I don't know how you pronounce that. Revanche. Well, it took me a few seconds. I was like, "What?" And I was right there, just like you were, Jordan. I was like, "Where? What, how?" And then I was like, "Who is that character?" And there was a moment, and if it had to have been fleeting, like for a very few amount of issues, or just something I never paid attention to, where Psylocke had traded minds with somebody. And that was the Revanche character. She was, I think, in Psylocke's body or
classic Psylocke bullshit.
Dude, seriously, I remember a couple of times going, just trying to follow along when I was originally reading the X-Men, what the hell was going on with that character? Revanche, or in parentheses they have listed as Quanon, Kwannon. is a fictional character appearing in American comic books published by Marvel Comics. The character is mostly associated with the X-Men, specifically the character of Psylocke, with whom she switched bodies. She was created by Fabian Nicieza and first appeared in X-Men number 17, February 1993. So there you go. Long story short, we got two teams here. We got the X-Men. We have the X-Men and we have the Avengers coming together in this crossover. And it was funny earlier tonight. I sent Jordan a message. I was like, have they done this before? Is this something that's kind of rare? And then, he proceeded to shove out there, what was it, X-Men number 9?
Yeah, we're still in the single digits and it already happened.
So X-Men number 9 occurs, X-Men and the Avengers meet, and then I found a list on CBR.com which showed the 15 greatest Avengers X-Men crossovers. And so there's been at least 15 instances, counting this one, which ended up, believe it or not, this particular crossover ends up at number 2 on the list. Can you guess did you see what number 1 was, Jordan, or did you look?
I did. I cheated and looked.
Can you guess, Chris?
I assume it would be the X-Men versus Avengers from the 80s miniseries, but I don't know. Or Onslaught.
Onslaught's number 1. Number 7 is the X-Men versus the Avengers from 87. Yeah, now they had a few on the list, including Secret Wars. That's pretty big, kind of far-reaching there. I mean, that's got members of the Fantastic Four in there. I don't know about that, but Bloodties.
That's more of a Marvel universe crossover.
Mm-hmm, yeah, Onslaught, I'd almost say it is as well. They threw that in there, but we're going to get to synopsisizing, and I'll talk about what happens in the book here, and then we're going to just throw out talking points, whatever we want to talk about, and we'll go from there. So, first things first, let's figure out how we're going to pronounce the name of this island. Because I went with Genosha and Genosha. So are we going with is it a soft G? Is that a soft G?
That's how I've always pronounced it.
Yeah, I've always said Genosha.
Sounds good to me.
I think that it appeared on the cartoon.
Oh, did it?
Couldn't swear to it, but I think it's on there and they pronounced it Genosha.
Well, it makes
I used
sense.
to call Magneto until I saw the cartoon and realized how it was supposed to be said.
Oh, that's all right. The pronunciation bridge is always here on the Source Material podcast. So, but yeah, Genosha probably would make sense considering we're talking about mutates and genes. So Genosha probably is correct. So here we go. Genosha, a small island nation off the southeastern African coast where mutants are kept as slaves, is now in a state of upheaval. Massive conflicts are now brewing as mutant slaves rebel against their former oppressors, as Magneto's magnetic pulse from the events of Fatal Attraction has allowed them the opportunity to make a stand. Many times, due to politics, the outside world will not intervene in the practices of the nation of Genosha, and resentment has been boiling to a point that a Genosian mutate appears in Avengers Mansion, advising them that the mutates have abducted the daughter of X-Man mutant Quicksilver and Avenger Inhuman Crystal, a human daughter named Luna. It's important to remember that this young girl is a human. As the Avengers plan to head to Genosha to get baby Luna back, they find that the evil Magneto disciple Cortez has killed all the Genosian government officials and also has baby Luna. With all of these tensions building, representatives of the U.S., including U.S. agent, talk Professor X into going to Genosha to attempt to calm things down. However, Professor X has also secretly sent his X-Men into Genosha to try and get baby Luna back. However, when the X-Men arrive outside of the capital city of Hammer Bay, they are greeted by Cortez's security force, the Unforgiven. Meanwhile, that's a 90s name. Meanwhile, the Avengers try to stop the fighting on the street, but are interrupted by the greatest Magneto disciple, Exodus, you remember that? He was a character from Fatal Attractions, who intends on saving the mutate population in the name of Magnus himself. Exodus is soon confronted by War Machine, but makes quick work of them, but is then confronted by the Eternal Cersei, who appears to be somewhat of a match on Exodus's power level. The problem is their battle is in peril of leveling the city, only adding more danger to the already out-of-control situation. Exodus subdues Cersei and escapes. During all of this, the violence between Genosian mutates and humans continues to escalate, placing many lives in danger. Also, U.S. Agent, Beast, and Professor X find hundreds of mutates being held captive. Now, I want to just stop here real quick. Now, you guys will notice that I'm using the word mutate a lot because they use that over and over in the book, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and I didn't understand why they called them mutates versus mutants. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Jordan, do you have any idea why they would distinguish between mutant and mutate?
I haven't read a lot of those earlier 80s X-Men issues where Genosha was kind of the central focus, but I know I've read some. It's been a long time, but I know they were created. Their mutant powers were given to them. They weren't born.
Oh, okay.
Right. They were like genetic experimentation. They were bred basically as slave labor, right? Basically.
Yeah. I mean, that's the idea I got, is because, I mean, this whole...
Or maybe they weren't intended to be, maybe they weren't bred that way, but that's the purpose they ended up serving as Genosha became more and more wealthy and whatnot. I haven't read those Extinction Agenda stuff either.
Well, that makes sense as to why we're calling them mutates, though. That's one thing.
But they are different from mutants, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the idea, that Genosha was this amazing paradise, but it was built on the back of slave labor and an oppressed underclass that was eventually going to rise up and, take back the power.
That's kind of what we're getting here. I mean, almost exactly what we're getting here, because now they have their chance. All right, so... Also, U.S. Agent Beast and Professor X find hundreds of mutates being held captive by the magistrate elite, very much resembling Nazi concentration camp. Crystal and Quicksilver reunite to try and find their daughter Luna and Cortez. When they find him, he explains he is using Luna as a shield, not only for defense against our heroes, but also from Exodus as well. When Exodus appears, he immediately kills Cortez and takes Luna, leaving the parents distraught. Outside, the X-Men are trying to save humans from the mutate rebellion and run into the Avengers. They decide to unite to face this crisis head on and try to end the threat of that Exodus poses to the island. While battling the magistrates, Xavier sends a distress message to his students, and the X-Men and Avengers are on the move. They show up in the nick of time to lend a hand to turn the tide of battle. Xavier determines that Exodus is a psionic of the First Order, and when Exodus confronts the two teams, he explains he will crush the island unless the Genosha mutates rise and kill every human. Now, when I say crush the island, I'm not talking about figuratively here. He actually has this barrier that he is shrinking down on the island, and as it shrinks, there's a real threat. It actually starts affecting the buildings, that it will just continue to fall in and collapse in on itself till there's nothing left of the island, and just everybody be dead. Okay, the teams make a decision to split in two to face Exodus and quell the mutates. The Unforgiven are back from their previous battle with the X-Men and are now followers of Exodus. Exodus plans to kill Luna. Yeah, Exodus plans to kill Luna, this kid, as she is considered he considers her a stain on the legacy of Magneto. Remember, she's human, and Magneto represents, the greatest and the ultimate of what mutants can achieve. So he believes that Luna is considered a stain on the legacy of Magneto. Before he's able to kill the poor child, Xavier hits him with a powerful psionic blast, and the Black Knight nails him with his sword, saving Luna in the process. Exodus gets up and flies away, but not before nearly killing Quicksilver, which was pretty funny. Just like, bam! And then he's laying on the ground, he's about to die, and he wakes up. They finally revive him. He's like, I don't think he likes me. The epilogue finds Xavier questioning his own actions of pretending to be human. I had no idea that was still going on. I did not know that was still a thing. But Xavier is apparently pretending to be human in order to try to help human-mutant relations, but it does not seem to be as effective as he thought. That completely got lost on me. Is that something that just everybody knew, that Xavier was always pretending to be a human, the human head of the School for the Gifted, Jordan? Or
yeah, he was never out, you'd say. It was just everyone used code names and stuff. They weren't the Fantastic Four in the public eye.
Okay, all right. Chris, did you know that as well? I mean, was that something?
I had kind of forgotten when I got to that moment in the book. I remember, oh yeah, that was a thing where like Xavier wasn't known as a mutant.
Okay.
He was just like the figurehead of this, like the School for Gifted Youngsters wasn't supposed to be to the outside world, wasn't a mutant school. It was supposed to be a prestigious like academy for gifted people. So yeah, I knew that in the past, but I'd kind of forgotten that was even a thing.
Yeah, I'll read here real quick what he says. He says, in the beginning, I thought it best to conceal the truth in order to help my X-Men. As an advocate for mutants who seemed human, I believed I acted as a bridge between our peoples. I thought I was right, but those were simpler times, and I cannot honestly say I am so sure anymore. Captain America speaks up and says, Charles, in a world where we continuously find reasons to hate and kill one another, who can ever be sure? So that's pretty much the last 2 panels of this series. So I first off, I went through the synopsis. I jumped through all that. I didn't give the breakdown of what we're talking about here. It's 5 issues. Came out in 1993. Spanned the Avengers and X-Men lines and West Coast Avengers. It's Avengers Volume 1, 368. X-Men Volume 2, number 26. Avengers West Coast 101, which is the second to last issue of that run. Uncanny X-Men number 307 and Avengers Volume 1, number 369. So those are the 5 issues we're getting into, all called Blood Ties. So, Jordan, let's go ahead and start with you.
The first thing that springs to mind, the X-Men have always been an allegory for tolerance and, respecting people's differences. And here we really go after it, dealing with like slavery or apartheid in South Africa. Mm-hmm. Hawkeye even mentioned Sarajevo, where, in the early 90s, there was a huge civil war, cost thousands of lives. So the people, who have recently come around saying, I don't like politics in my comic books. Well, here's a prime example that comics have always been political. They've always dealt with these issues, some a little more than others. But this one was definitely head on going after those issues.
I left out a good portion just because I don't know if it furthered the narrative or what, but I mean, there is quite a few times. I think it's the West Coast Avengers issue where some of the Avengers go and they're talking in front of the United Nations. Yeah. And they're trying to get across, okay, here's our point of view. And of course, the United Nations are like, well, here's our point of view. And I didn't talk about how, they were told to keep the Avengers out of Genosha. Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. were there to try and keep them there. Of course, some of them escaped. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of political overtones throughout this whole book, that's specifically dealing with, stepping into a country that has its own beliefs, but a lot of us and many of us with a soul might believe that those beliefs are wrong. And
it showed that the flaw in having the Avengers as like a UN sanctioned organization, that having a government body over them can hinder, their effectiveness in some situations like this.
Is it Black Widow who's talking in front of them and saying, okay, we're done. We're done being political dogs. We're done we're done dealing with politics. We're going back to avenging. Was that said in there?
I think so.
I can't remember if that was the West Coast Avengers issue or not. But yeah, you're right, Jordan. I mean, we're right into the real political thick of things here. Yeah, okay, we don't have mutants in this world, but there's some very real consequences, I think, that could arise from our involvement, which, we're just watching our heroes go in here and try and write this, try and first off stabilize the situation. And number two, the dingo ate my baby or Cortez took my baby. We got to get that under control as well. But I mean, real political ramifications. I assume that the reason why, and I didn't look it up, but I assume the reason why we didn't get into we didn't step into the conflict with Genosha is probably because we don't want to meddle, we don't want to interfere.
Yeah, I think Nick Fury says right out, we can't have you superhumans dealing in human politics. It sets a bad precedent. But that's going back to the golden age. There was always some reason. Why wouldn't Superman just fly over and stop Hitler? Why wouldn't Iron Man end the Vietnam War? We always kind of sidestep those issues a little bit because we were living in, we were dealing with fantasy, and they weren't this kind of gritty realism. So I think it wasn't until the 90s they felt comfortable maybe dealing with some of this stuff. And I really love they use these two teams. The Avengers always seemed the more straight-laced, would cooperate with the government. Captain America, a good patriot, where the X-Men were always kind of the outcasts. Anytime they had dealings with the government, it ended really badly. So you have this two kind of opposing forces, both trying to help people. And, what's the best way to do it? Do you do it by the book? Do you just, do it more guerrilla style? So it was a nice conflict between the two teams and their philosophies.
To piggyback off of that, you can also say that they're kind of a representation of what's going on there, too. We have the Avengers who, they're superhuman, but they're not mutants. And we also have the X-Men who are mutants. So they kind of represent the two peoples on Genosha that are fighting each other at that point in time, and they come together right now. And that was one of the things I said. These two teams do not fight each other at all in this book, which is, usually when you see the teams cross over, there's going to be some kind of misunderstanding and somebody's hitting somebody. Oh, now we got everything figured out. Let's team up.
That's standard superhero storytelling.
Exactly. Does not happen in here. They kind of look at each other and say, yeah, we got a problem. We've got to, we got to solve it. So check out The Hook. Vanilla Ice there, Chris.
Well done.
Thank you, sir. But they actually just say, okay, well, we've got to deal with this situation. Crystal and Quicksilver. Jordan, do you know much about the relationship between these two?
It was always rocky. It was never a real match made in heaven.
Okay.
They were always, he was leaving her, she was leaving him. It was, so I think this was one of their off again moments.
They had to come together to save the baby. So, well, this is Exodus' second showing here, Chris, because we walked into Fatal Attractions. I'm like, Exodus, what? So we have a little bit more under our belt now with who Exodus is. What do you think here about I would say he's our main villain of this story. You got any thoughts on Exodus?
Cortez is just like a stepping stone to get to the main bad guy, it seems like. He kind of is the impetus of getting like the X-Men and Avengers together, coming after Luna. Mm-hmm. But Exodus is like the big show.
We don't get a whole lot as to who this character is. I think it's
that's what I was kind of hoping for when you said we were going to do this one. I was like, oh, finally I get to. I mean, I could just go to Wikipedia and look up Exodus, I guess, but I wanted a little more revelation about who he is, where he comes from. There were a few times where Black Knight clearly knew who he was, like he couldn't place him, but he's like, I know who this guy is. Why can't I remember him? What and whatnot. And there's never any resolution in these issues. So
no, I think it's questioned a couple times. It's almost like he's getting ready to reveal something, and you're just like, okay, well, he doesn't say anything, and then the battle's on again. I guess it was kind of nice to get a little bit more, but right. we don't get a whole lot.
We do get to see we get a good idea of like how powerful he is. He is like a high class mutant as far as like his power set. I kept seeing the word psionic used back and forth, especially when he was fighting Circe. That's become like a catch-all for like telekinesis and telepathic powers and stuff. And I went and I looked up what psionic actually means.
Okay.
And it has more to do in like as far as like a real world application with like paranormal stuff. Like I guess that kind of counts as telekinesis, like people moving stuff with their minds. But in comics, it's just become like a way of saying, oh, they're super powerful. They're a scion. Have psionic powers.
Yeah.
And that's basically all we got with Circe and Exodus was like they're having this huge battle with like massive amounts of energy, coming off of them, and it's because they're psionic.
Yeah, it's clear that Professor Xavier's like, we've got this guy's pretty powerful. If Professor Xavier is going to respect him, he deserves, he deserves some like, oh my goodness, okay, be ready. This is a big dude here.
He was powerful enough that he like had Jean Grey pretty much neutralized without even trying. So
yeah. Jordan, Circe, did you have any insight? Can you give me any inkling as to what extra stuff we learn about this Eternal, which I've heard the name a couple times. I did some Wikipedia research. Anything else on Circe that you could possibly provide?
Then you probably know more than me. I know the Eternals are they're eternal. They've been around forever, and they're like reincarnations of Achilles and Apollo and all these, ancient deities. So,
okay.
I think if anyone's going to stand against this amazing mutant godlike guy, it would have to be her.
Chris Armstrong, what'd you pull from these 5 issues? What's your thoughts here, man?
It's a kind of a step down from Fatal Attractions, but I mean it kind of has to be because there was so much big stuff happening in those issues. But that Fatal Attractions was like a 30th anniversary X-Men event, and this was the 30th anniversary like Avengers event, which kind of shows like how much of a bigger deal X-Men was at the time than Avengers. Like Avengers doesn't even get its own crossover. It's like, well, let's bring in the mutants. For their 30th anniversary crossover. They did have like some those foil. There were a few other, I think, foil covers for some Avengers books around this time as part of like the 30th anniversary thing. But yeah, pretty cool that they bring them together for this series. The art was really cool in a couple of the issues. I do like Steve Epting more now. I guess this was his early days, and he's not bad, but like all the characters are super buffed up. These costumes that the Avengers are wearing, it's mostly, you know, super 90s out. It's right after they kind of got an overhaul in their costume designs. So I'm not sure if Epting did the costume designs or not, but like 4 of them have those brown leather jackets, including Black Knight, who is supposed to look like a knight, but he's got a laser sword, chainmail, knight's helmet, and leather jacket.
Yeah.
The Andy Kubert issues, obviously, I would say he's probably the best artist of the bunch in these 5 issues. Avengers West Coast has I can't recall the artist's name off the top of my head.
Dave Ross.
Okay, yeah. Who I remember from around this time. I wouldn't say he's a bad artist or anything, but he's kind of the lower tier from these issues. And you had mentioned that you thought John Romita Jr.'s issue, which was Uncanny X-Men 307, was kind of a far cry from I guess 303, whatever issue was in the Fatal Attractions story. And I see what you're saying. I was going to check and see if he has a different inker maybe for this issue, but I never. I was going to do all my research today, and I ended up outside working all day, so I didn't.
That's all right. Well, yeah, we got Dan Green inking. I don't recognize the name, but I can tell you that it was one panel with a face, and if I can take a picture of it here real quick, I will. And I was like, what? Why does this look like this? That's what was going through my mind. I could not figure out why it was. And I've liked Romita Jr.
Romita Jr. has the Fugly syndrome going a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of his characters aren't that appealing. Like, they look cool. I like his art, but like, it can be a little jarring sometimes. Everything's blocky, which is one of the reasons I think he does better with like stuff like Thor and the Incredible Hulk, stuff that's like really big, powerful characters.
Jordan, you got any? Give us your thoughts on the art throughout these 5 issues.
Yeah, there was a definite jump when you went from issue to issue. And like I said, when I was a kid reading these, I was only collecting X-Men. So I had read 2 of the 5 issues, and it must not have grabbed me enough to go out and look for those Avengers issues. And I must have just got the gist of what was going on. But yeah, there were definite, reading it as a trade paperback, the chapter ends and then the next chapter starts. Either new characters are there, or like there's at one point U.S. agent is like, he jumps underneath the truck and hitches a ride, and then when the next chapter starts, they're just standing there talking like, hey, what's up, guys? So it's like somebody missed a transition.
I know. I was like, he's being awful sneaky just to be showing up and saying, hey, how's it going? I was like, just hop in the back of the truck, dude. It's all right.
Yeah, I think we skipped, like, when he next shows up with Beast and Professor X, like, they'd already skipped the part where he introduced, like, or told them that he had been following them and whatnot. They were just all together already, right?
Completely left out. Yeah, it was completely left out.
Yeah, there were a few awkward moments like that, but I'm sure, jumping from creative team, it's not the same writer for the whole 5 issues. But I didn't like the sideways pages.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
so
a thing
awkward to read, and some of the layouts trying to do like the 2-page spread where I would read the wrong panel, like they weren't, the layouts were a little off, and it wasn't just one artist, it was several of them. So I don't know if that was a 90s specialty or editorial mandate or what.
Well, Romita did that in the Fatal Attraction issue too, right? Several pages were sideways. The last issue that McFarlane did for Spider-Man, one of Liefeld's last X-Force issues, there were like special quote unquote widescreen issues where you had to read them that way. Every page in every of those 2 issues was like that. And so maybe some other artists wanted to try that because they liked the look of it or something. That would have probably been about a year before these issues came out.
The art as a whole didn't bother me. Even looking back on it, I can, all the mullets and the huge muscles and lots of pink accents on the costumes. But I have a warm spot in my heart for that, so it didn't bother me. Nothing was egregiously bad about it.
This is the panel right here. It took me.
Black Widow.
Yes, she looks frightening. Okay,
some severe cheekbones.
Did not understand why. I don't know. She just, and it could be the inker, because I've seen Romita Jr. art that looks fantastic. I remember having the conversation with Benjamin J. Colon, who, is a comic artist himself, and he explained to me, you got to think about who's inking these people as well. I don't know if that's what's going on here. Could be the colors. I have no idea. I just know that most of the issue, it just kind of had me going, well, I don't know if he was phoning it in or if, we just had a bad day, and that can happen. But either way, out of all the art here, I think his was probably my least favorite. And Kubert's up there. There's no, I don't think there's anything in the 90s that is going to touch him, in my opinion. This is Andy we're talking about too, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, loved Andy's stuff that he was able to put in for the second part of things. Jordan, I mean, I know you write comics. Have you ever tried to write a story where another person picks up part of that story and is trying to tell that narrative through a comic? Do you think that'd be an easy thing to do, or have you ever tried to do that?
Absolutely not. It's hard enough just communicating one writer and one artist, trying to get your point across and have the same view of what you want on the page, but to then hand that off to somebody else to pass the baton and try to continue the story you're setting up. That would be so difficult to do, I would think.
The issue that stuck out to me was the West Coast Avengers issue. That one was written by Roy Thomas. Man, you talk about a difference in writing. Like, I think Roy Thomas was like, I'm just going to let, a lot of the panels speak for me. I'm not going to bog it down in dialogue. And if you compare that issue to the rest of the 5 issue or the rest of the other 4 issues in this series, you could tell that there's way less dialogue in that West Coast Avengers than Fabian Nicieza. When he went at it, I was like, I had flashbacks of what we were doing with Fatal Attractions and some of those, like that X-Force issue, or no, it was X-Force where Cable comes back, and it's just like, it felt like a continuous, it was tough to kind of get through.
A lot of captions, like almost writing it in novel form, like describing everything that the artist should probably be showing you, or sometimes referencing, stuff that's happened in the past to kind of catch the reader up. But a lot of text in those captions.
So yeah, Gambit, that was like the first note I had here. Gambit came off kind of like, I mean, look, I know it's all about getting the baby back. I know we got political tension everywhere, but we got Gambit, who is just like massive horn dog. That's all I can think of.
He's not changing. You can't calm him down.
The jambalaya. Needs spice in the jambalaya. Oh boy. But yeah, he's definitely, when he gets a chance, he's sliding a few words edgewise in there to old Rogue, and then it's back to business. But that was one of my issues. Then we have the other thing I had listed here is, Quicksilver. For those of you out there who don't know much about Quicksilver, his dad was Magneto, and he's still trying to work through all these things that his dad has done. He's a member of the X-Men. He's trying to do good here. If you want to talk about staying on a legacy, I mean, my goodness, Magneto and his all the actions actions of terrorism and all that happened through Fatal Attractions, all the bad stuff that he did, the stuff that he did to Wolverine. Quicksilver's trying to get past all that, but continually he is reminded by Exodus coming down and saying, "You're not as good as Magneto," and then he has to deal with almost getting killed at the end, which was, like I said, that was pretty funny. But luckily, he obviously he doesn't die.
Almost an afterthought, just like, by the way, before I leave, fuck you, Quicksilver.
It was too. He's like, all right. I don't think he likes me. So
reading these, it reminds me of the way the comics used to be way more reliant on long form storytelling and planting seed. They might be standalone stories or story arcs, but they would plant seeds that just lasted for years and years and years. And it seems like so much less of that. I think there's obviously people writing for a trade paperback. They want everything to be more self-contained. Creative teams aren't on the books nearly as long, but just in the midst of this huge crossover epic, there's a nice little scene of and he's starting to doubt his choice from Fatal Attractions.
True.
And, that plants a seed there. there that's going to lead to something later. You know, Iceman is having a crisis of nobody takes me seriously. It's like the story's not about you, Iceman. Relax. But there's a couple panels of him like, you know, they treat me like I'm still 16. So there's just these neat little character moments or plot moments that don't affect the story that's going on right now, but that, you know, lead to a little more down the road. And I like that so much in a format like comics that, you know, it relies on serialized storytelling and just, you know, coming back month after month to be engaged with these characters.
Yeah, character development and keeping those characters interesting and not making them one note. I mean, you know, yeah, Bobby could have showed up and fought for like 3 seconds. He gets a few words in, and for fans of that character or people who are interested in that character's development, you know, get a little bit more further of the story. Just like you said, it's not writing for the trade.
For the complaints we had about, you know, the story being a little choppy from issue to issue, it's, you know, it starts out by talking about the EMP that happened during Fatal Attractions led to the panic. They thought, you know, Magneto was going to come and, you know, take over Genosha. And, you know, the event just ends with the Avengers leaving the UN and scrapping the charter that they were abiding by. So, like, it all fits. It's a nice, you know, there's we use the word continuity for a reason. There's a continuity from beginning to end and what came before and what came after. So it's nice to go back and look at these and remember that it's all a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, often now, like in more recent Marvel and DC stuff, it just seems like it's more short-sighted. Everything, it almost seems like they're in desperation mode. They're trying to get to the next big event. Everything is kind of centered around that, and there's not a lot more. They're not worried about like building on the past so much as like getting the next event out to try and sell more of the, you know, Civil War 3 or whatever they're doing next.
Yeah.
That build up for that to the end of that event too. I mean, Jordan, how long have we been waiting on Doomsday Clock to end here? When should it have ended? I mean,
wow. We've got like 3 more issues to go, so probably another year and a half.
That's one that like I'm invested, like I've got to read it every month, but after like the 3rd issue, I was like, I should have just waited till this was all over with and then read it all like in one sitting, because waiting 2 months between an issue is like, I don't remember half of what happened in the previous book.
Just looking to see where the Avengers go from this in issue 370. Enter the realm of the deviants. So I have no idea what the deviants are.
I want to say the deviants were like an offshoot of the Eternals, maybe. I can't remember. I don't think I read those. I remember hearing about them though.
I was going to say, like within the first panel, Cersei is falling down and through the skylight of the Pentagon. The roof of the Pentagon, apparently. So.
Could just throw a little more cold water on how modern comics have kind of made this story moot, that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch aren't even mutants anymore. Did we remember that?
Oh, jeez.
I don't know how that was revealed because I didn't read it, but I have heard that that's the case now, yeah.
I'm pretending like it's not real until they go back and fix it.
Yeah, I mean, eventually, now that they can make X-Men movies, that'll get changed, I'm sure.
So that's canon in comics as well?
Yeah, they were experimented on by the High Evolutionary. They thought they were mutants, and they weren't even Magneto's kids. They were the actual kids of the Maximovs, the people they thought were their foster parents. So that was all because they were using these characters in the Marvel Studios movies, and we don't have rights to the mutants, so we've got to, well, they were never mutants. What are you talking about?
I do not like that. I mean, I'm okay if you want to change things for a movie, that's fine. But now I'm talking about for the movie. I'm not talking about changing things in the comics for the movie. That I don't like.
The funny thing is, like, they're trying to make the comics more like the movies, and it's like the people who watch the movies don't give a shit about the comics.
They don't.
Like, those movies don't drive people to read comics.
No.
At least not from what I can tell. And you own a comic shop, right? So yeah. I used to work
ever since the X-Men movies, and they put all the X-Men in black leather, like they've been over backwards to try to, hey, don't these look familiar? And it has never made a difference.
Yeah. Comics are for comic readers, not for the movie fans.
If you could give me an idea of, you don't have to, just give me a snapshot of what comes into Asylum. I mean, do you see a lot of people? Do you feel like the movies are driving some sales, or do you feel like that's actually making an impact on the customer base you got coming coming in?
On the younger generation, definitely, because I'll get kids in there 8, 9, 10 years old, and they know all these characters. I don't know if they've studied the Wikipedia or whatever, but they know all the side, even characters haven't been in the movie.
It's YouTube, trust me.
Okay.
my 5-year-old son could just rattle off just about anything that deals with a couple video game properties. I would have no idea about if it wasn't for YouTube. So go ahead.
So yeah, I'm guessing they haven't read all this source material, if I could use that term, but they have, they know about it, and they know the characters, and they've got shirts with the characters on them. So as far as a knowledge base, for sure, yeah, the older readers, they love the movies, they love the comics. They're a little more cynical about how it all fits together and whether the tail's wagging the dog or not. But
I look at it in my family. I got 3 kids, 14-year-old girl, 9-year-old boy, and a 5-year-old son as well. We got the chance to go in there for free comic book day, and I was like, I'm curious as to who will pick up what. I think Caleb ended up with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one. Oh my goodness, I cannot remember the other one that he picked up. Colton, I imagine he could, as much as I tried to drag him over there, Jordan puts video games in there, so the extras had Colton kind of occupied, so we just kind of picked out a couple for him. But I can tell you that my kids are definitely invested in the movies. I don't understand why there's sometimes that disconnect for people to go, I'm just invested in the movie. Why wouldn't you want to go pick up a comic book? I don't know if it's just because you don't want to get into the history, you don't want to buy the book. I'm sure that's the other thing. You just don't want to spend money and time getting a comic book, which we can talk about the price of comic books if you want. But I remember the days of the 75-cent Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
I could get a hold of, and it's kind of daunting to get into that. But this is where I think that's where it all started. I hate to see that. So yeah, when a company comes in and starts changing things in order for it to fit in whatever movie or TV universe is out there, I'm just like, just like Chris said, they don't care. they don't seem to care. There's no way that they're going to raise an uproar. The people who are the people who are the longtime readers that you're getting money from. They're the ones that are going to be upset.
Comic books are so ridiculously complicated that whatever you do is never going to be, streamlined enough for that mythical first-time reader. It's like, I understand all of this. Like, you just kind of have to dive in the deep end and figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've said before on another episode, I think, but like sometimes I'll have, when I was working at the comic shop, I would have people come in and they would be like, my son really likes Spider-Man. He wants to start at the beginning. And I'll have to be like, look, that's not how comics are read. Like, you don't want to go back to 1963. Nowadays, it's not really the same. But when I grew up reading comics up to the early 2000s, you could pick up almost any comic and they would give you the information you need in that issue, to enjoy it. Now it's not the same. Like, if you tried to read, for example, a few weeks ago we did Secret Invasion. And if you tried to do that, knowing nothing about the characters, it wouldn't make sense at all.
Yeah. It's a different time. I mean, it's definitely a different time. We're looking at a comic book right now when these 5 issues came out in the early 90s. Somebody who picked up a book now may be in the middle of a story, and it seems like a lot of times this would be kind of representative of what you would get. You have an arc that doesn't run through multiple issues. They don't really do that a whole lot anymore, do they, Jordan?
It's less and less. Something like this would be a separate miniseries today.
I said multiple issues. I should say multiple titles.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So yeah, you don't see that a whole lot as much as you used to. So jumping into something, I think you have a better opportunity to find a starting point, maybe because you may be able to find the start of an arc a little bit easier because there's so many out there. They what are we on right now with Spider-Man? It's the Hunt or crap. What is it called? Hunted.
Yeah,
I think the Hunted is over with now. They're on to something else.
Okay, so you go. I want to read that particular arc for that character. And if you have a base understanding of who Spider-Man is, you may be able to enjoy it. But either way, hey, we're all crotchety old comic book readers here. we're trying to make it through. That's why it's fun to go back to the 90s to kind of relive what I was reading back then. And that book, Jordan, you didn't scratch your notes in the back, did you?
No, it is still in mint condition.
Good. Yeah, what had happened is I loaned Jordan a copy of Bloodties, which I ended up getting went to an auction. Oh boy, I think it was a year ago. It was about a year ago. And I had seen this was the largest comic book auction I'd ever seen in my entire life. I walked into a warehouse and there was at least between 250 to 300 long boxes of comics. And then they had keys out the wazoo. Well, one of the things that they had were boxes and boxes of trade paperbacks of books. And there was this one right here. There was a box of mostly Marvel trade paperbacks, and it had the Bloodties. The guy that owned all these, he kept them pretty much in mint condition, very good condition. You could tell they were hardly read if at all one time. But anyway, yeah, this Bloodties one had a spot in the back, which just blows my mind. It had a spot in the back that said notes. It was one page. Like they didn't know what to throw on the back of that page.
So it was like printed in with the issue.
It said notes, and you could write in. It was just blank. It was like a piece of paper that you could write your stuff in, like your notes in, if you read it. And I told Jordan, I said, I've never seen anything like this before. And I don't know if that's something that they did a lot of back then or not. But either way, Jordan was not allowed to write in my comic book, so I made sure to tell him that.
I had to borrow it because this volume is currently out of print at Marvel, so that shows where it is on their list of importance.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even order it anymore.
I was going to try and pick up the trade because I had 2 of the issues in my collection, and so I went looking for the trade. I've got 2 local comic shops here. Neither one of them had the trade, and I was able to get one of the back issues, and then the other 2 I had to order.
Oh, really?
I think mycomicshop.com.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, I was going to say you got now you have the actual issues for the whole story in your possession, sir. That's something.
Well, they're not expensive.
Really?
Nobody from a movie appeared for the first time in one of these issues, so nobody cares about them.
Yeah, I gotta say, I was just at a Comic-Con this weekend, and I could have found every single one of them in $1.50 bins, but
yeah, well, that's
I kept seeing them as I flipped through. I was like, I could have got that.
I was going to say it was cool to see the Beast. He appears first in the Avengers issue. Like the characterization of Hank McCoy is a lot different, it seems like, when he appears in Avengers versus X-Men. Like when he's in the Avengers, as we see him show up here in a Hawaiian shirt, he's jumping around and jokey and everything. Whereas in the X-Men books, he's usually, he's the scientist. He's not really cracking jokes. He may say, "Oh, my stars and garters," or whatever. But anytime I see him pop up in an Avengers issue, he's always like the bouncing. I forget what they call him exactly, but they make him more into like a jokester type, party animal type. The only time we really see that in these issues is the first appearance when he first pops up, showing up at with Professor X. And I don't understand like where that came from. Do either of you know like why is he so much more of a party animal when he's with Wonder Man or with the Avengers than he is when he's an X-Man?
That I do not have an answer for. Go ahead, Jordan.
Well, this first panel, he describes himself as the bouncing, bodacious, ever effervescent beast.
Okay, there we go.
So yes, making your point for you.
Yeah, there's an issue of Bu6 Avengers run where he shows up after Wonder Man had come back to life or whatever in the early issues of that, where he jumps into Avengers Mansion, he's jumping off the walls and like can't wait to go out on the town with his buddy Wonder Man. But I never see that side of him in any of the X-Men books. I guess because the X-Men books have to be depressing. It's like an editorial rule, maybe.
One of the comments I was going to make about him is that he's kind of like the journeyman of superheroes. I mean, he's been. I just want to look to see. Let's see how many teams he's been on, because I can name 3. I'm pretty sure. Well, you're going to. I guess we'll count X-Men. X-Men X Factor. Was he part of the Defenders? I want to say he was.
May have
I
been.
imagine, or maybe the Champions.
It was definitely the Champions. Okay, so team affiliations, straight off the wiki here. Team affiliations: X-Men, Avengers, Defenders, X Factor. I did not know he was part of the Illuminati.
Okay.
So I thought,
the Reed Richards, Tony Stark Illuminati.
yeah, I didn't know
Like the
he was part of
smartest
that.
people in the world.
Then we have the Secret Avengers is listed here as well. Notable aliases as Blue Gorilla, Creature with a K, and Mutate 666. So let's just talk real quick about characters here. I mean, before we close out, I think one of the good keys to writing comics is knowing your characters. I've learned that a lot here, especially lately. Our last conversation we had on Civil War II, oh boy, I learned about the mischaracterization of Carol Danvers and how bad that apparently was. Is there any character, Jordan, out of this story that feels like he wasn't written like he should have been, or anything that sticks out to you that just like, okay, well, that character kind of stood out for this particular reason?
Well, this book, we keep comparing it to Fatal Attractions, but it doesn't have any of those big plot moments like Fatal Attractions did, where you can, talk about Magneto, the heel turn from Colossus, Wolverine getting his adamantium ripped out, like these, iconic moments. This book doesn't have any of that, so it's pretty much all on the characters, and a lot of it is sitting around just talking about politics. So for this to be a good story, you have to be invested in these characters. Yeah, a few of them, like we said, are only in it for a couple panels.
Revenge. Right.
War Machine flies in. I did take of this. I wrote this in your note section there.
No.
This enough of your rap, Exodus. Let's rumble.
Oh boy.
So I thought,
yes.
Ow, that's unfortunate. So yeah, I think the main characters, I think the villains are a little weak. They, there's a lot of preening and monologuing and stuff, and some of these side characters who don't get enough screen time are a little weak. But I said the main characters, I like Professor X, Captain America, Nick Fury. These people who it's an interesting dynamic they all have to have, and how much they can do to help these people or not. So there's a little good and a little bad.
Everybody was into the X books in the 90s, and the Avengers were not really on my radar, so I can't really say that, okay, yeah, this feels like 90s Cap, or this is definitely where I think the Black Knight should have been at this point in time, because I wasn't reading those books. We also have the same creative teams that have been on these characters, I think, throughout their runs at the time. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain that, these writers, Roy Thomas wrote West Coast Avengers at this point in time. It wasn't like he was brought on specifically for this story, much like we see in the events of recently. Like when we talked about, again, I'll throw it back to Civil War II, that was Brian Michael Bendis writing all these characters throughout the Marvel Universe. So his take on these characters might be different from how they were portrayed before. I don't know if we're getting any of that in here to where it just feels like, oh, that isn't who that should be. That isn't how they should be portrayed. But that's just my opinion, because we have the same writers on the same characters. Nothing really takes a nosedive when it comes to character representation here. Well, really the only thing you can say is that the story arc itself might just have been tough to tell the same beats as the story moved along. I have no idea about story planning between the editors. We kind of already covered that, but I imagine that's tough. Chris, anything stick out to you character-wise? We already talked about Beast. I mean, was there anything else there?
Not particularly. They kind of did keep the focus on just a handful of Professor X. I guess he probably had the biggest spotlight of all the heroes, and Cyclops and Captain America as the two leaders. There was never any interplay between them of who's in charge or who's taking the lead and whatnot. And most of the West Coast Avengers were out of the action for a while doing with the UN stuff, and then they all kind of show up at the end. But yeah, I don't really have anything specific outside of that. It seemed like it was sort of Professor X, and it seemed like War Machine and Storm had kind of a big role, but it was really spread out. Like there were so many different characters. A lot of them didn't get a whole lot to do, but I didn't find anything that was like, that's not how they would do that. I wanted more Captain America, obviously. That's almost any book that's not his own. Yeah. They can always throw a little more Cap action in there, but
sure.
Yeah, he has my favorite moment in it, especially after Endgame. I'm all about Cap. I want more and more Cap and everything, but it's right at the very end. They've already come together. We said they didn't have any kind of conflict. They're all there together to help each other. And Storm has this half-page splash page where she has 8 word balloons trying to rally the troops. We must put our differences behind us. We got to come together. And Cap just says, "Yeah, as I said, Storm, we're here to help." He has one little balloon that's like, "Yeah, let's get on with it. Stop talking."
I'll tell you one thing. The covers, we talked about the chromium or the foil covers and stuff like that. I'd say my favorite one is probably X-Men 26, where Cap's on the front holding his shield up. We got Scarlet Witch to his side, Rogue's on the other side, and Cyclops down in the middle. If you were to show me that cover, I would tell you, okay, yeah, I know that's from Bloodties, because I've known that cover for years. And of course, the foil cover with where Exodus is descending from the sky. Oh yeah, that's Bloodties. I know that one. But anyway, all right. Well, we've been talking for a little bit over an hour here. I guess, final thoughts here, Jordan. Final thoughts? What's your final thoughts on the book?
I'm glad to have reread it. I don't think it's an all-time classic, but it has good moments. It's an interesting read. It's an important chapter of those 90s era for both Avengers and X-Men. And I love the central idea of it, that heroes are there to protect people. It doesn't matter your politics, your species, even your race, your creed, your religion, any of it. When you're a hero, you don't let bureaucracy stop you from doing what has to be done. And I believe it was Black Knight saying doing the smart thing doesn't necessarily mean doing the right thing. So they keep telling them, this is not the way to do this. This isn't the correct way or the smart way. It's like, yeah, but you do it the right way.
Very good. I don't know if you guys got into this on your podcast. Me and Chris and Mark had a nice little discussion about what's up for the next phase of the MCU, or I should say what's the next big end game for the MCU. Do you think AVX is out of the question here, or what do you think, Jordan? Where would you go from here?
I'm not sure how you bring the X-Men into things right away. That would be so just a real left turn, I would think. I'm not sure. We were all so exhausted by Endgame, and like we can't even think about the future now. We gotta relax and recuperate a little bit.
When I was doing my little research trying to figure out if these two teams had met before in the past, I was just besieged by like 6 or 7 websites right there at the top of Google. That's going to be the next thing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's going to be Avengers versus X-Men, and I'm like, ooh, well, okay, all right. Chris, final thoughts on Bloodties, man. Tell me all about it.
Yeah, I mean, a far cry from the Fatal Attractions crossover, but a solid, like, Avengers X-Men book, firmly entrenched in that early 90s, just before the bust, the comic bust. It was kind of, now, Wolverine's been an Avenger, the X-Men and the like mutants and the other heroes, they're together every other month in a comic or in an event or whatever. But back then it wasn't like, this wasn't the first time or even the second time, but it was a big deal when like the X-Men and Avengers were in a book together, and they threw both teams of X-Men and both teams of Avengers into this 5-parter with like some real world connection to the storyline that was going on. So it's definitely worth reading, especially if you're trying to hit all the big bookmarks of Marvel Comics. It's not a game changer. There's not like stuff in there that's like has lasting effects down the line, like a Wolverine getting his adamantium ripped out and whatnot. But it's definitely worth a read. It's not something I'm probably going to read again for a long time, but it's also something that I'll definitely probably revisit again in the future.
Okay. So Luna Maximoff does not have a very big Wikipedia page.
Does she exist anymore? I don't know.
Well, I'm taking a look here. First appearance was Fantastic Four, number 240, created by John Byrne. The last thing they have listed here in the wiki. So she's apparently she was brought up in the Son of M, Silent War.
That's from maybe 10 years ago. I never read that.
Black Bolt. Yeah, okay. So Inhumans, that makes sense. Secret Invasion. Luna is endangered when one member of the invading Skrull. Luna's in danger, everybody. Oh, well, wait a second. Luna is in danger.
Fate, I think.
That's her one mutant power, to always be in danger. Even though she's a human, ladies and gentlemen. Luna is endangered when one member of the invading Skrull army is disguised as one of her playmates. After the Skrulls were repelled from Attilan, Luna was seen with Maximus as Medusa heads into space to look for where the Skrulls are holding Black Bolt. And then she was in Dark Reign, which that will be, I think at some point we'll be talking about that. Luna was present when Attilan in Attilan when Quicksilver brings the Zeragen crystals to Medusa. So it's like I don't think she's much of a major player. She's just kind of like that person. And if she's human, she's probably just hanging out on the sidelines.
Is she? I guess she's probably like a teenager by now.
According to this, okay, I saw a recent picture of her. She looks like she's still recent picture. So it's just like, yeah, checked out her Facebook page. I mean, she looks like she's okay. Whatever this first picture is off of Google Images, she looks like she is maybe 9 or 10. But there is apparently a Luna Maximoff from Earth 98, which I don't know what Earth that is, but she is clearly a woman, a 20-year-old woman there. That's not the 616. That's the Earth 98, which I don't know what that is. Actually, hold on. I could tell you. Made it back because they had it listed there. She was
the one with the American Dream and
Dusty Road
Girl.
Oh, wait a second.
Maybe.
In the alternate future of Earth X, Luna has sprouted colorful. She's engaged to be married to Ahura, the son of Black Bolt and Medusa. The planned festivities are interrupted by the Inhumans, not understanding what Earth has undergone. Okay.
All right. Wait a minute. They're all related, aren't they? Because Crystal is cousins with the royal family, so that their kid would be some blood relative.
Keeping that bloodline pure.
Why did I go down this road? So, okay, well, I think that covers it. I don't think I really have much of this. Has been a very good installment of Marvel Event May here. I had a fun time reading this. Like I said, I don't think I've had a chance to read this before. Like I said, picks up right where we left off after Fatal Attractions. We get a little bit more of the story. The mystery of Exodus continues is pretty much what we get out of this. At some point in source material podcast, we will come up with the answer as to what the hell Exodus is. We'll get into plugs now. Let's go ahead. We'll start with Jordan Lowe of Ka-Pow, the Pop Cultured Podcast. And you got a ton of things you need to plug here, man. So
sure. I won't be too obnoxious about it, but if you're in the Marietta area, I own Asylum Comics, 212 3rd Street. Jesse's in there occasionally. You might even run into him. I'm a co-host of Ka-Pow, the Pop Cultured Podcast. You can find us on Facebook or www.udownwithkpp.com. We do movie reviews, TV reviews, gaming, comic books, a little bit of everything, just whatever we're into at the moment. Our most recent episode, we just did over 2-hour review of Endgame that we gushed about on and on and on. And I am also a comic book writer for So Pro Comics. You can find all those at soprocomics.com. They're all ages friendly, and by that I mean like books from my childhood. Adults could read them, kids could read them, everyone would get something out of them. It's not just for mature readers or just for young kids. We're trying to make comics fun for everyone once again. So thank you very much for having me on, Jesse. Appreciate it.
Oh man, we won't make it another 3 years, okay? It's going to be a little bit quicker than that, and at some point I have got to figure out, because school's going to be out for summer, sir, and I am going to have to find the last 25-year-old wizard.
Oh no!
And then I'm bringing to Ka-Pow, the Pop Cultured Podcast, the old CBIQ from 25 years ago. I've just got to find the issue. Tests are coming. Get ready.
Those are always fun. I hope there's a Bloodties question on it.
Oh man, there very well could be. There could be. That'd be what? So 25 years ago is 1994. So I know that we'll probably be knee deep into some Valiant and some
little Ultraverse.
Yeah, could be right in there on those CBIQ questions there. So Jordan, I don't know if Jordan even promotes this anymore, but I'll tell you guys right now, all you have to do is go to YouTube and type in. No. I want you to type in Running the Asylum. I guess throw in comic, and I'll even do you one better. My favorite episode is episode 4. Type in Speculator. If we're talking 90s comics, you need to watch Running the Asylum episode 4. He did a web series. How many episodes did that go? Like 8?
I think I wrote 12 of them, but we only got 6 of them made.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. It's a day in the life of a comic book store owner and some hijinks, RoboCop. I'll never forget it. I watched those years ago. Shoot, dude, those were uploaded 6 years ago, but still to this day, I can remember sitting there watching them. And Caleb, my 9-year-old son, was wanting to watch more. And then when we went to the con and we saw Who's your buddy that was always in the episodes? I cannot remember. Logan. Yep. When we saw Logan at the con at one point, Caleb would he couldn't believe himself. He had saw TV star, sir. He saw a television star. So anyway, all right.
And I meant to thank you for the kind words about Free Comic Book Day on your recent episode you and Mark did.
Oh yeah, man. I'm glad we had the chance to get on there and talk about our experiences.
I was a little worried after 8 or 10 minutes of Mark complaining about his store. I thought, oh no, is Jesse going to rake me over the coals too? But you were nothing but gracious.
Dude, no way. We had a good time. I'm glad I got to take the whole family in too. And so, all right, Chris Armstrong, let's hear it, man. What do you got to plug here, sir? Because I know of one spectacular thing that you've done for the Unspoken Decade, and you need to plug it right now.
Yeah, I did a piece on the UnspokenDecade.com, which is a 90s comics fan site. Just the top 10 moments from the Infinity Gauntlet, which is my favorite comic book pretty much ever, and was the impetus for all the Thanos, in the Marvel MCU stuff. So I'll look back, kind of in honor of Endgame coming out and the conclusion of all that stuff. I looked back at Infinity Gauntlet and picked my 10 favorite moments from that series. So you can check it out on the UnspokenDecade.com. My Twitter handle is @BrodyMan34. Working on something. I've been working on a Blood Strike a Blood Strike / Brigade story for the Decade.com for months, and now that I got the Infinity Gauntlet thing out of the way, I'm going to try and finish that up and have it up pretty soon as well.
All right, let's get out of here. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Jordan Lowe. That is Chris Armstrong. I'm Jesse Starcher. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good one. Bye-bye. And that's the way the news goes.
Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Rattlich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.